I walked into my house and found my wife bleeding on the living room floor, while my own son and her in-laws were laughing and eating dinner in the kitchen like nothing had happened. By sunrise the next morning, what I did to my son, most people would call it ice cold. I called it necessary. Welcome back to Dad Raw Revenge. Get comfortable. Remember, the people in these stories had every chance to do the right thing. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe and smash that like button if you're ready. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Let me take you back to the beginning, because if I don't, none of what I did will make sense, and I don't regret a single thing. My name is Paul Jarrett. I'm 63 years old. I've been married to Angela for 30 years, and up until 11 days ago, I would have told you my family was solid. Not perfect, nobody's perfect, but solid. The kind of solid you build over decades of showing up, paying for things nobody ever says thank you for, and loving people who sometimes make it damn hard to keep loving them. My son Xavier is 29 now. Grown man with broad shoulders, a firm handshake, and a good job. A good chunk of that job, I'll be honest with you, came from doors I personally opened for him over the years. But we'll get to that. Xavier married into the Dalton family about 2 years ago. His wife is fine. Nice enough girl. But her family, her father, Dale Dalton, and her mother, Patrice, let's just say the first time I shook Dale's hand at the wedding reception, something deep in my gut twisted and whispered, "Watch this one." The living room lights were dim that evening, the air thick with the smell of catered chicken and cheap cologne. I shook it anyway, smiled anyway. Because that's what you do when your son is standing there with that look in his eyes. The one that says he's completely head over heels. That was my first mistake. And it sat in my stomach like bad coffee for the next 2 years. 11 days ago, I flew out to Denver for a series of business meetings. Nothing unusual. I travel 4, maybe 5 times a year for work. Angela knew I was going. The whole family knew. What nobody knew, including that my last meeting got canceled on day 10. I could have stayed in that sterile hotel room, ordered room service, and watched cable like a man with no responsibilities weighing on him. The minibar hummed softly under the TV stand, city lights flickering through half-drawn curtains. Instead, I booked the first flight home. I didn't call ahead, didn't text. I wanted to surprise her. 27 years of marriage, and I still liked surprising my wife. Sue me. I landed, grabbed my bag from the carousel under the harsh airport fluorescence, and drove myself home through the familiar suburbs. It was a little past 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the lawns. Here's the first thing I want you to notice, and stay with me because the details matter. When I turned onto my street, the engine ticking as it cooled, I saw Dale's car parked outside my house. That silver Buick he loves like it's some kind of personality trait, parked right there in my driveway, like he paid the mortgage on the place. The chrome trim caught the afternoon light, gleaming smugly. I felt that old gut twist again, sharper this time, like a finger pressing into an old bruise. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe they just came for lunch. Maybe Xavier had invited them over. People visit family, it's normal, right? I was tired from the flight. Recycled airplane air still clinging to my clothes. Probably reading way too much into things. I parked behind the Buick, gravel crunching under the tires, grabbed my bag, and walked up the front path. The house already felt off before I even reached the door. The air carried the faint scent of whatever they'd been cooking. Garlic, maybe onions mixing with Angela's usual lemon cleaner. The house was loud. Not party loud, loud in a layered, overlapping way. Like 2 completely different worlds were unfolding under the same roof at the exact same time. From the back of the house, from the kitchen, I could hear laughter. Loud, comfortable, relaxed laughter, bouncing off the tile floors and cabinets. Dishes clinking, conversation flowing easy, the sound of people with nowhere else to be, and not a single care in the world. And from the living room, just steps away, silence. The wrong kind of silence, heavy, unnatural, like the air itself had been sucked out. I pushed the front door open, hinges giving that familiar soft creak I've heard 1,000 times. And I saw her. Angela was on the floor. not sitting casually, not resting. On the floor, her back pressed against the base of the couch, legs splayed out like she'd crumpled there. Her right hand pressed tight underneath her nose, knuckles white. Her white blouse, the one I bought her last Christmas, had a dark stain spreading across the front. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. Blood. Her eyes found mine the second I stepped inside, afternoon light catching the sheen of unshed tears. I've seen my wife cry at sappy holiday commercials, tissue box always on the coffee table. I've seen her cry at other people's weddings, dabbing her eyes with the corner of a program. I've seen her cry because a song on the radio reminded her of her mother, shoulders shaking softly in the passenger seat. But in 27 years, I have never seen her look the way she looked at me in that moment. Like she had been wading through pure willpower. Like she had been holding on by the thinnest thread. Like the second her eyes locked on my face, something deep inside her finally exhaled and said, "Okay, he's here. You can let go now." That image, her on the floor, blood on her blouse, that look in her eyes is what sealed everything that came after. The living room smelled faintly of blood, metallic and sharp, cutting through the distant kitchen aromas. I did not panic. I am not a man who panics. My bag hit the hardwood with a dull thud. I crossed the room in 3 long strides, soles squeaking slightly, dropped to one knee beside her, and called 911 right there. No hesitation. While the dispatcher walked me through keeping her calm, while I checked her pulse thready and fast under my fingers and wiped blood from her face with my bare hand, feeling its warmth on my skin, I could still hear them from the kitchen, laughing. My 29-year-old son and Dale and Patrice Dalton carrying on like they were at a casual dinner party. Like nothing in the world was wrong. Like my wife wasn't just 11 feet away bleeding on the living room floor while paramedic sirens wailed faintly through the open line. I want you to sit with that for a second. I really do. Because I had to right there on my knees with my wife's blood on my hands and their laughter ringing in my ears like some sick background track. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, each second stretching. The paramedics arrived in 8 minutes. 8 minutes that felt like 8 years. Flashing lights painted red and blue across the walls as they burst through the door. They moved fast, professional, calm. The lead paramedic, a young guy no older than 32, name tag reading Briggs, looked up from the cuff with an expression that told me everything. "Mr. Jarrett," he said quietly, "your wife is in hypertensive crisis. Her pressure is critically high. This didn't just happen. This has been building. She needed attention before this point." What my son told me in the next 4 minutes about why my wife was even on that floor would change how I saw my own child forever. And it was only the beginning. He said it professionally, without accusation. But the words landed like stones. I looked toward the kitchen where the laughter had finally gone quiet, and I felt something shift inside me. Something hot and frantic just minutes ago went very, very still. Cold. Ice settling in my veins. I held Angela's hand until they lifted her onto the stretcher, vinyl creaking under her weight. She squeezed my fingers weakly. I squeezed back. Twice. Our thing. 27 years of that silent code between us. Then I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the kitchen. The transition from the living room chaos to the kitchen doorway felt like stepping into another world. Air warmer. Heavier with the scent of finished food and sweet tea. Plates still sat half-eaten, condensation beating on the glasses. I straightened my shoulders one last time as my shoes crossed the threshold. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something about me. I am not a violent man. Never have been. I don't raise my voice in my own home, don't throw things, don't make scenes, but I am, without question, a man who handles things. And right then, standing in that doorway with the faint smell of sweet tea and garlic still hanging in the air, it was time to handle something. The kitchen lights buzzed softly overhead, casting a warm yellow glow over the wooden table, still cluttered with half-empty plates. Forks rested at odd angles, condensation dripping down the glasses. I've walked into a lot of rooms in my 63 years. Boardrooms with millions on the table, Hospital rooms where people I loved fought for every breath. Courtrooms, churches, gravesides, but nothing has ever felt like walking into that kitchen that afternoon. The laughter had died completely. Like someone flipped a switch and cut it off mid-breath. The three of them sat frozen at the table. Xavier at the head, shoulders tense. Dale to his left, silver-haired and tanned. Patrice to his right, hands folded neatly. Plates and glasses of sweet tea surrounded them like they'd just finished a perfectly normal Tuesday meal. In my house, while my wife bled 11 feet away, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, letting the silence press down. Over 63 years, I've learned the most powerful thing a man can do when fury is boiling is to slow down. Every instinct screams to speed up, but slow is scarier. Slow means you're in control. Slow means you've already decided. So I stood there, slow and quiet, and looked straight at my son. Xavier stood up. I'll give him that. He pushed his chair back the second he saw my face. Dad, he started, voice cracking. I held up one finger, just one. He stopped cold. I turned to Dale first. Dale sat with hands folded on my dining table like he was chairing a meeting, like he belonged. I looked at him for a long moment, light reflecting off his watch. Then I said it, voice so calm it probably scared them more than shouting. Get out of my house. Dale blinked once, slow. Patrice set her glass down carefully, ice clinking. Xavier opened his mouth. Dad, just let me explain. I'm not talking to you yet, I cut in. Get out of my house. Both of you, right now. Dale shifted, trying to play reasonable. Paul, if we all just take a breath. Dale. My voice stopped him. I didn't ask for a breath. I asked you to leave my house, and I'm only going to say it one more time. That's when it got interesting. Patrice grabbed her purse, fingers trembling. She touched Dale's arm with that silent wife look. Not now. Let's go. Dale rose slowly, chair legs scraping tile. As they passed through the living room, they finally saw her, Angela, on the stretcher, oxygen mask on, IV in her arm. Patrice stopped dead. Hand to her mouth, Dale went completely still, color draining from his face until he looked gray. I watched them take it in faint blood on her collar, closed eyes, tubes, and equipment. Watched realization hit them like a freight train. Good. I needed them to see that. I needed that image burned behind their eyelids forever. They left without another word. The front door clicked shut, sound echoing through the empty house. Suddenly, everything was very, very quiet. Just me and Xavier. He stood at the kitchen table, hands at his sides, jaw tight. He had his mother's eyes. Right now, those eyes couldn't decide between defensive and ashamed. I walked back slowly, pulled out the chair across from him, sat down, folded my hands on the cool wood, and looked at him. Sit down, Xavier. He sat. Talk? I said. And I want all of it. He exhaled hard, ran a hand over his face, and started talking. What came out in the next 4 minutes rearranged everything I thought I knew about that afternoon. Xavier told me the Daltons hadn't just stopped by. They'd planned it for 3 full weeks, waited for me to be out of town. Came with legal paperwork for a commercial building I've owned for 19 years, the one I always told him would be his one day, when the time was right. Dale decided one day meant right now. They figured with enough pressure, Xavier would sign away controlling interest, while I was 1,100 miles away and clueless. These people walked into my home, sat at my table, and tried to manipulate my son into signing away part of what I built with my own 2 hands. I kept my face completely still. Inside, a completely different storm raged. And your mother? I said quietly. Where does she come in? Xavier stared at the table. She overheard. She wasn't having it, Dad. You know how she is. 30 years I've known exactly how she is. She told Dale the property wasn't Xavier's to sign, that they were out of line. Dale talked over her. She got loud. He got louder, until she suddenly stopped. She said her head was pounding. She felt dizzy. She excused herself and went to the living room. Xavier trailed off. I thought I was going to check on her, but Dale started talking again, and I got pulled back in. Again and again. He couldn't finish. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the paramedics' low voices and the soft roll of stretcher wheels. I sat with his words, letting them settle like lead in my chest. "So let me make sure I understand," I said. Voice changed. "Your mother told him he was out of line in her own home. He talked over her. She told you she didn't feel well, and you went back to the kitchen." Xavier said nothing. "You went back to the kitchen," I repeated. "Dad, I didn't know it was serious," he whispered. "She has high blood pressure," I said. "For 6 years. You've known that for 6 years. A stranger understood the urgency. And you," I stopped. That terrible realization hit when you've raised someone, loved someone, sacrificed for someone, and suddenly see that somewhere along the line, something didn't take. I stood up slowly. "I don't know who you've been spending your time becoming, but he is not the man I raised." I walked out and back to my wife's side. I didn't speak to Xavier again that night. The silence wasn't weakness. It was me thinking. And when Paul Jarrett gets quiet, when he gets very, very still, that's when you should start to worry. There's a particular kind of quiet that settles over a house at 2 in the morning. The heavy kind. The kind that presses down on your chest and makes every small sound feel amplified. The refrigerator hum, the wall clock ticking, a distant car passing outside. That's the quiet I sat in that night. Angela was finally asleep, soft nightlight casting gentle shadows. It had taken the medication. Lowered lights, 3 of my pillows arranged just right, and 40 minutes of me sitting on the edge of the bed, holding her hand before her breathing evened out, and her exhausted face finally relaxed. I watched her sleep for a long time. I thought about 30 years. The woman who married me when I had more ambition than money, who worked beside me building everything from scratch, who raised our son with more patience and grace than I ever had. The sheets still carried her lavender lotion mixed with hospital antiseptic. I thought about her crumpled on that floor, blood on her blouse, and the image hit like a fresh punch to the gut. Then I stopped thinking. I slipped out, went to the study, sat at my desk, opened my laptop, cracked my knuckles, and went to work. I am not an impulsive man. Every move that night had already been decided in the kitchen. By the time I sat down, the anger was gone. What remained was something cleaner. I was decided. The first call was to the bank at 2 in the morning. Xavier had been an authorized user on my card for 6 years. All those charges, gas, groceries, dinners, that Nashville work trip gone, the woman on the phone was efficient. Less than 4 minutes. Then car insurance. Then the apartment I'd co-signed. Then the monthly transfers I'd been sending quietly for years. At 3:15, I canceled them permanently. That money wasn't just dollars. It had been funding a version of my son who always knew someone would catch him. Not anymore. Then came the calls I won't apologize for. I called men I'd known for decades and told them Xavier no longer had my backing or my name. Everyone asked if I was all right. Everyone respected it. That's what 63 years of keeping your word gets you. By 5 a.m., streaming accounts were gone. Subscriptions canceled. Locksmith booked for 7:30. I stood at the kitchen window with coffee, watching the sky turn from black to gray to pale blue. The first birds started calling. I thought about Dale Dalton probably staring at his ceiling, wondering what came next. He should, because I'd already left a voicemail for my attorney at 6. Make the Garrett Street property ironclad. Dale would never touch anything I built. By 9 o'clock that morning, my son would be standing on my front porch with a key that no longer worked. And he still had no idea what I had already done while he was sleeping. Xavier showed up right at 9. I watched from upstairs as he tried his key once, twice, stood perfectly still, knocked. I didn't answer. He tried calling phone dead. Then he walked to the Petersons. Barbara handed him her phone with a worried look. My phone rang. When I picked up, his voice was different. The defensiveness was gone. What was left was raw, younger the boy he used to be before the Daltons shaped him. I let the silence sit. Then I said, "You let your mother lay on that floor, Xavier. You knew her condition. You knew what stress does to her. And when she needed you, her own son, you chose to go back to that table." He didn't speak. I could hear him breathing. "I love you," I told him, voice heavy. I will always love you. But love is not the same as access. And right now, every door I've kept open for you is closed. For how long? He asked quietly. Until you've become the kind of man who doesn't need me to answer that question for him. I hung up. I walked back to the bedroom. Angela was awake, morning light across her face. She looked tired but present my wife again. Is everything okay? She asked softly. I sat beside her, took both her hands, and looked at her the way you do when you almost lost someone. Everything, I said, is handled. She searched my eyes, then nodded slowly and leaned her head on my shoulder. That familiar weight brought the first real calm I'd felt since walking through that door. Outside, my son sat on the Petersons' front step with a dead phone, a declined card, and a key that no longer fit any lock in this house, surrounded by the echo of every quiet comfort I had quietly built around him for years. Inside, I held my wife's hand and exhaled. Some people will say I was too hard on my son. Maybe I was. But I watched a stranger, a paramedic, fight for my wife's life with more urgency than the man I raised. And in that moment, I understood. The greatest act of love I still had left for Xavier wasn't keeping every door open for him. It was finally letting him feel exactly what it costs when those doors close. He'll either grow from this, or he won't. But Angela is alive. She is safe. She is home. And right now, sitting here holding her hand in the morning light, I realize that's all that truly matters. If this story hit in any way, if it made you angry, made you think about your own family, or just made you feel something, I'd really appreciate it if you dropped a like. It helps these kinds of real stories reach more people. If you want more raw, honest family stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you have your own story, feel free to share it in the comments. Sometimes just saying it out loud helps. Thank you for sitting with me through all of this. I'll see you on the next one.